If swimmers have an effective start, that can create an advantage that lasts throughout the rest of the race. Conversely, if they have a poor start, they can be at a significant disadvantage before that race really even begins. Hi everyone, Andrew here, helping you help your swimmers get faster. We're going to talk about block starts, what really needs to happen in order to have a good one, and how to think about block starts in a way that's really simple so you can figure out what your swimmers need to do to improve and how to make it happen. When it comes down to it, there are two key skills that swimmers really need to have in order to have a great start. If they can do these two things well, their start is going to be good. Making it happen isn't necessarily easy, but it's relatively straightforward. First, swimmers need to have a clean entry. If swimmers can enter the water cleanly, they're going to carry their speed from the start much more effectively, and they'll be better able to maintain that speed in through the water. The other aspect of the start that's really important is being able to project the body out as far as possible and do so in as little time as possible. So swimmers want to get off the block fast, they want to get off the block far, and they need to enter the water cleanly. That's going to create as much speed as possible, and by entering cleanly, they're going to maintain as much speed as possible. So let's check out what it looks like so you can help your swimmers improve their starts. So if we watch these two swimmers here, what you'll notice is what they don't do. And what they don't do is create a lot of splash. And so you can see when they enter, that wave just kind of plops up and just kind of disappears. So if you have a splash that's really big, it's going to the side, it's going back, it's going forward, those are all indications that the entry was not particularly clean. And if the entry is not clean, that means there's not going to be great alignment going to the water, and that means swimmers are going to lose speed. So as much as possible, the entry needs to be as clean as possible. They have to organize their body in the space so that they enter clean, and that's going to maintain as much of the speed as they create off the block into the water, and that's going to be a huge advantage carrying that speed down the pool. So we'll watch another swimmer here, and as you can see, not much splash, and that's going to allow him to maintain as much of his speed as possible moving down the pool. So the goal is to enter super clean, and then again, minimize the resistance that they create as they move through the water. And the better they can do that, the more speed they're going to maintain, the faster they're going to be able to get through to 15 meters, and the faster they're going to be able to hold that speed throughout the rest of the first lap. So again, super clean on this entry, not much splash, entering on more or less one hole, and that's exactly what they need to do in order to maintain really great speed and minimize the resistance that they create as they enter the water. Now, when it comes to getting off the block, there are two really important things that swimmers need to do. Now, when they're sitting on the block, their center of mass is going to be behind that front foot, because if it wasn't, they would fall into the water. So in their starting position, their center of mass is back, and they need to start moving that forward. And so there's two kind of approaches that you can take to do that. The first, which the swimmers are going to do here, is they're going to pull with their arms, and that's going to pull their body forward, and they're going to push with the back leg, and that's going to move the body forwards. So by pulling with the arms and pushing with the back leg, now the center of mass, the body, is going to roll forwards. And now, because their body is in front of their feet, they can push with that front leg, and that front leg is going to send them forward down the pool. So the first thing they have to do is get everything moving forward. And the better they can get everything moving forward, the faster that they can get everything moving forward, then they're going to be in a position to really push with that front leg and really get the hips up and out over the water. So ultimately, pretty simple, get the body moving forwards and then really drive off that front leg. To get the body forwards, they're going to push with that back leg off the wedge, and they're going to pull with the arms to get the body moving forward. So that's the strategy that these swimmers are using here in order to create speed and get off the block fast and get off the block far. So this swimmer here, he's going to really release those arms forwards, and instead of holding onto the block and letting the body move past the hands, he's just going to bring them forwards and get them moving forwards as fast as he can, as opposed to using the arms to really pull. And so that's a key difference between the approach that the previous swimmers took and this swimmer. So again, he's got to push with the back leg. He's got to get everything moving forwards right there. So now he's rolling forwards, he's moving forwards, and now his center of mass is in front of that front leg. So now he can really push here right there and get off that front leg and get as forwards as possible, as fast as possible. So So you can see swimmers that focus more on getting the hands forward fast as opposed to pulling back on the block to get the body moving fast. That's what's happening in this case, and that's going to be a little bit different strategy than the swimmers that are going to literally pull themselves forward off the block and then push. And so in both cases, though, the body needs to move forward. They're going to use the back wedge. They may use the arms to get the body moving forward, and then they're going to drive off that front leg, and that's where they really get a ton of speed. So we'll take one more look here. So if we watch this swimmer, he's going to pull himself forwards and then push himself forward with the back leg. So now his center of mass, again, is in front of that front leg. So now he can really start to push with that front leg to send himself out over the water. So again, the first movement, the first motion, he's got to pull himself with his arms. He's got to push himself with his back leg, get everything in front of the body, and then that's where he can drive off the block and get as far as he wants to be. So everything's not working at the same time. They've got to push or pull themselves forward and then drive off that front leg, and that's what's going to create a ton of distance and a ton of speed. So one more time to contrast the two arm strategies. In this athlete, there's just kind of touch and go with the arms, and then he's going to drive himself forward with the back leg, and now he's in position to really push with the front leg. That's one strategy. And then in the alternate strategy, the athlete's going to pull himself forwards and push with the back leg, try to get forwards, and now he's not bringing his arms back on purpose. He's moving his body past his arms, and that's why you see these arm swings with some of these elite athletes, is that they've pulled their body past their hands, and now they have to swing things around to get back into a position as fast as possible, and that's going to be different than the athlete that just throws the hands forward from the beginning. So the arms are not being pulled back for an aesthetic reason. They're pulling the body past the arms, and now the arms are kind of stuck behind the body. The only way to get them around is to swing them around. And so that's the key skill that really matters there. So while there are a lot of components in the start, what really matters is entering the water clean and then getting the body moving forward and then really driving off this front leg once the body is forward of the block. And if swimmers can do that, they're going to be really effective. It's ultimately a simple skill in terms of what actually needs to happen. Making it happen is potentially a different story. However, if swimmers can move the body forward fast, drive off that front leg, and then enter clean, they're going to have a great start. If there's one word to describe how to execute great relay exchanges, that word is momentum. The more momentum swimmers can create in the blocks and the more they can direct it in the right direction, the faster their relay exchanges are going to be and the faster their first 15 meters is going to be. We're talking relay exchanges, the key principles, the key skills swimmers need to learn in order to have a great one. Well, the actual start of a relay exchange can seem really complicated because there's a lot of moving parts. We're going to focus on the key underlying principles so that you can understand what swimmers really have to do, and that will help you design more effective strategies to actually improve their relay exchanges. Before we dive into the video, I want to go over the big concept that's really critical to understand. That concept is momentum. The biggest difference between a block start and a relay exchange is momentum. When swimmers are on the blocks, they have zero momentum, and they've got to generate a lot of force to get their body moving. And because they're starting from rest, they're only going to be able to move it so much, so fast, and that's going to limit how far they can get off the blocks. In contrast, during a relay exchange, swimmers can step back and then they can move forward, and the more momentum they can move forward down the block until they get into the position where they're actually doing their start, the more speed they're going to carry off the block, the more force it's going to go into the block, and the faster they can get down the pool. Once they're airborne, the start is basically the same, but the more momentum they can create, the more speed they can create on the block, the faster and further they're going to be able to get out. And so again, momentum is the key word. When swimmers are executing a relay exchange, they have to create as much momentum as possible, and they want that momentum to be moving them down the pool. Let's check it out. So let's watch this exchange here so we can see what aspects of the start create momentum and the mistakes that swimmers can potentially make. So by having the foot back behind the wedge, by having the body back further, that's going to give them more space to run up, to create momentum, to get forward down the block, to generate speed, to get off the block. If swimmers stand with both feet on the edge of the block, they're not going to be able to generate any speed because they're not going to be able to move their body forward. They can use the arms, but they're only going to be able to use the arms. So in contrast, this swimmer is going to step forward, and they're going to take a big step, and that's going to get them a lot of momentum moving down the block and a lot of momentum forward. So that big step, you can see the body is already moving forward, and that's going to help generate momentum to get them off the block further and faster. Now, what are some of the key elements that determine how well a swimmer does that? So the first thing is that the faster the foot moves, the faster he steps over, the more momentum he's going to have. So if he's really patient with this step, it's going to have less momentum. It's going to take more time. He's not going to generate as much speed. So he wants to step as fast as he can under control in order to create as much momentum as possible. And that'll get him off the block faster. The second aspect is the direction of the foot step. So if the swimmer steps up, and this swimmer is doing a little bit of it, it's not too bad, but if he steps up, momentum's going to be going up instead of momentum to be going forward. And so as much as possible, swimmers want to step forwards across the block, and they want to step with as much momentum moving forwards. And obviously, they need to be careful of not clipping the block, so they do need to lift up with the leg a little bit, but if they can do so without lifting the body up, that's going to help create more momentum. So if he takes this step here, and his whole body rises up, and he does rise up a little bit, but it's not too bad. But if you can imagine, he takes that step and rises up, that's going to kill his momentum. It's going to be moving in the wrong direction. You want it moving forward. And along those lines, what he does with the arms is going to be important too. So it's the same principles. The faster he can swing his arms, the more momentum he's going to have, which is going to send him forward. And so a mistake that a lot of swimmers make is they'll start the arm swing, and then they'll kind of pause and wait, as opposed to just whipping it through and really sending it. He does a pretty good job here. You just want swimmers to be aggressive to get off the block fast. Another issue of momentum is if he starts to swing and those arms swing up and that carries the body up, that's going to move the body in the wrong direction. We want him going down the block. We want him going out. So this swimmer rises a little bit here, but then he stops it right there. So what you see sometimes is that the arms rise up and then the body keeps rising up, and they almost stand up and step forward, which is the exact opposite of what they want to do. Everything needs to be moving forward off the block, and that's going to create as much momentum, as much speed as possible. The better job swimmers can do that, the more speed they'll have, the faster they're going to get off the block, the further down the pool they're going to get, and that's going to help them create as much speed as they can. So when swimmers do a relay exchange, it can be really easy to get caught up in a lot of the noise surrounding what's happening. But the key ideas are to create as much momentum to get forward down the block, to get off the block as fast and as powerfully as possible. And that starts with the step. The step should be relatively low. It shouldn't raise the body up, and the step should be fast. Second aspect of it is the upper body. The arm swing needs to be a full commitment. Once the arms go, they need to go and they need to accelerate as opposed to kind of slowing and stopping them. And the second thing is the arms need to stay low, and they shouldn't pull the body up as they swing. It should be a swing that moves them forwards rather than up. And again, that's going to create all the momentum that gets them down the pool. And so a lot of these issues can be related to timing because swimmers aren't sure when to start. They just start, they realize they're too early, and then they slow their momentum, and that's going to kill the start. So swimmers have to know when to go, and then when they go, they need to go. They have to keep it low, they have to keep it moving forward, and they can't really slow down because that's going to kill their momentum. Obviously, if they totally mistime the start and they're going to disqualify unless they slow down, they want to slow down to make sure it's a legal start. However, that's not an optimal start. So when helping swimmers learn relay exchanges, it's all about momentum. Swimmers want to get as much as they can because that's what differentiates it from a regular start. They're going to do that by stepping forward aggressively, stepping low aggressively, swinging the arms aggressively, and swinging the arms low aggressively. That'll keep everything moving forward rather than up, and that's going to create a really fast, really effective start. Backstroke starts present a significant challenge for most swimmers. But if we can lock in on the most important and the key skills for effective backstroke starts, we can simplify the process and start to develop strategies to help swimmers learn these key skills. We're going to break down the key skills of effective backstroke starts so that you can develop strategies to help your swimmers learn these skills as quickly and as easily as possible. There are three key elements of the backstroke start that are really important. First, swimmers need to project themselves over the water. Second, they need to actually perform a back dive and enter the water cleanly. And three, they need to control their depth upon entry. So a lot of swimmers really struggle to project out. A lot of swimmers really struggle to actually dive. They just kind of fall back into the water. And third, a lot of swimmers are either too shallow or too deep as a result of the path they take when they execute their dive. If we can help swimmers clean up those skills, we're going to help them swim a lot faster over the first 15 meters in their backstroke races. So let's check out what swimmers need to do in order to execute great backstroke starts so that you can start to develop strategies to help swimmers improve their starts. So the first key aspect of a great start is the ability to project the body out. Swimmers have to be able to get out over the surface of the water. The more they can do so, the less resistance they're going to create. If they drag through the water or they enter the water close to the wall, that means they're going to have to swim underwater more, which is going to be more resistance than traveling over the water. So if we watch here, you can see at this point, swimmers have thrown their body back, but now you get the real strong push of the body, and that's what's really going to project them out. So they have to have the strength to push into the wall and then to some extent push down into the wall, and that's going to get them out over the surface of the water. If swimmers don't push, they don't really exaggerate that drive, they're just going to kind of fall back into the water, and that's going to create a lot less speed than if they really drive into the wall and really jump. Now, obviously, there's a strength component to this. If the swimmers lack the ability to create a lot of force quickly, they're not going to be able to project particularly well, and they may not be able to project well at all. However, they still need to try to push as much as they can, and in conjunction with land work, they can develop the strength over time to eventually be able to really project themselves well and really execute a great push off of the wall. Here's another example from a different angle. You can see that right now they're relatively crunched up, and they're going to really extend, and right here, you can watch how they really drive through the wall, and right there, that's how they really push out and project themselves over the water. So again, swimmers have to push into the wall really hard. They're gonna have to push down a little bit in order to get the hips up, and they're trying to get themselves up and out and over the water. And the better they can do that, the more effectively they can do that, the stronger they can push, the easier it's going to be to execute an effective dive, which is going to be really important for entering cleanly and reducing resistance. And that brings us to the next key skill, which is that swimmers actually have to dive into the water backwards. And so you can see here, you really get the impression and the understanding that it's a backstroke dive. They've literally dived into the water going backwards. And that's really important because a lot of swimmers are simply pushing and throwing the arms backwards, and they're not actually trying to dive into the water. And you can see the swimmers are going to throw their head back, they're going to throw their body back, they're going to arch their back, and that's going to allow them to enter the water, actually dive into the water and enter the water cleanly. You can see here, both swimmers are able to enter through one hole, and that's going to greatly reduce the amount of resistance that they create, and it's going to allow them to swim a lot faster. And so the dive aspect is grossly underrated. A lot of times swimmers are just going to push and they're just going to see what happens, where in reality they actually have to dive. And so one of my favorite strategies for helping swimmers learn to do this, and it doesn't require a lot of strength, is just having them literally practice back dives from the side of the pool. They start to understand how to manipulate their body, how to go backwards, and how to dive backwards, because a lot of swimmers actually have fear about going backwards into the water. They're not sure where their body is, they're not sure where their head is, and that can really limit their ability to actually dive into the water. And that's a key aspect of a great backstroke start. So literally practicing back dives independent of a racing start can be really effective for helping swimmers learn how to manage their position in the air and do so going into the water backwards. Another key skill is entering the water and finding an appropriate depth and diving in a way that allows them to be at the appropriate depth. So if we watch here, swimmers are going to enter and they're going to find a pretty horizontal position pretty early. So if we watch these swimmers here, they enter going down, but they quickly reverse that and they quickly level out, and they're at an appropriate depth, which allows them to do their dolphin kicks, allows them to make their way to the surface without having to take more time or travel more distance. So a big part of executing a great start is managing their trajectory into the water, finding the appropriate depth so that they can maintain as much speed and create as little resistance as possible, which is going to allow them to maintain that speed. So again, when swimmers dive into the water, they need to find a way to manage their position, and a lot of that can be set up by the trajectory they have over the water, but also they can use their hands as rudders, and if they need to steer that hand up, that can help them change their trajectory. So if we watch this swimmer in the first lane, we can see that he's entering the water, his hands are pointed down towards the pool. Right there, he's changed the direction of his hands, and that immediately starts to level him out and prevents him from continuing to sink deeper and deeper. So one, swimmers need to enter the water cleanly and then manage their trajectory by using the hand kind of as a rudder to change their depth and get them aligned in the water and moving towards the surface of the water without going too deep. So if we watch these swimmers here, same idea. They're going to manage their position. They're going to find a way to enter the water cleanly, and they're going to find a way to transition to the surface well without going too deep. And that's going to allow them to maintain as much speed as possible without losing any speed. And that's going to set them up for the rest of the first lap. So managing the depth of the dive is really important, and that's going to allow swimmers to carry a lot more speed into their first 15 meters. Now, if we watch the swimmer right above me, you can see that the hands are pointed down, and right there, he adjusts the hands, he levels them out, and that's going to change his trajectory. And it allows him to smooth out the transition, so suddenly he's a lot more horizontal, whereas he first entered the water as an angle. Now he's in a position to transition to the surface a lot more effectively. So if we watch it one more time, right there, he starts to adjust his position. You can see him level out, and that's going to help him transition into a really great underwater, into a really great breakout. So while backstroke starts aren't easy to execute, the big picture concepts are ultimately really simple. Swimmers need to project themselves over the water. They need to be able to execute a back dive, and that can often be best learned from the side of the pool. So swimmers get comfortable with that basic movement, with that strategy. And then swimmers need to manage their position once they get into the water so that they level out. They don't go too deep, they don't go too shallow, so that they can smoothly transition to the surface where they can then start swimming backstroke. So if you can help your swimmers learn to project, if you can help them learn how to dive into the water effectively, and you can help them transition to the surface more effectively, you're going to have much more effective backstroke starts. They're going to be a lot faster over those first 15 meters. There are different ways for swimmers to set up on the blocks and make that happen, but ultimately they need to project, they need to dive, and they need to transition. And if they can do all those things well, they're going to have a great first 15 meters. While swimming speed is an absolutely critical aspect of going fast, if swimmers aren't being effective with their turns, it's going to cost them a lot of speed, and it might even cost them races. There's been multiple analyses that looked at which factors determine performance outcomes, and almost always turns are a huge part of that, and in some cases, they can be the most significant aspect of it. So if you're not sure what the key skills are in effective turns, it's going to be a lot more difficult to develop effective strategies to improve those turns, and that means swimmers are going to be leaving performance on the table. While there are nuances and aspects of turns that can be important, we're going to focus on the big picture strategies that swimmers need to execute in order to have effective turns. We can focus on what really matters and what matters unquestionably. It's going to be a lot easier to help swimmers improve their turns and help them go fast. There are three key aspects that we're going to cover here. The first aspect is that swimmers need to maintain their speed into the turn without hesitating. The second aspect is that they need to tuck tight to get a fast flip turn. And the last aspect is they need to push off straight so that they can minimize the amount of resistance they create coming off the wall. While there are other subtleties that can be relevant in certain circumstances, these are the three key skills that swimmers have to do effectively if they want to have fast turns. If they hesitate into the wall, it's going to take more time. It's going to make it more difficult to flip. If they don't flip tight, they don't flip fast, it's going to take more time. And if they don't push off straight, they're going to lose all the speed they generate from that strong push off. Let's check it out. So if we watch these swimmers here, what you'll notice is that there's zero hesitation into the wall. With their last stroke, they're going into the turn, they're executing that turn, they're not waiting to make it happen. They're just going right into it, and there's no hesitation. So a key aspect of an effective flip turn is knowing when to start that flip turn and how to make it happen at the appropriate time so that swimmers can maintain all of their momentum into the wall as opposed to giving it all up, either pausing into the wall or having to short chop their strokes and then finishing really close to the wall where, again, they kind of lose all their speed. So having an effective approach to the wall is really, really important as it allows swimmers to transition smoothly into their turn, and it allows them to do so without losing the speed that they've generated while swimming fast on the surface. So the same is true of backstroke as in freestyle. They're going to smoothly transition, they're going to time their rollover at the appropriate time, and they're going to roll right into that turn without hesitating, without pausing. It's one continuous fluid movement. And the more swimmers can do that, the more momentum they're going to maintain, the more speed they're going to generate into the wall, which means the more speed they can generate out of the wall. So being really consistent and really fluid with their approach is really critical because it allows swimmers to hold the speed that they've worked so hard to generate on the surface of the water. The next key skill is tucking really tight because that allows swimmers to get through the turn itself really fast. And the key skill with tucking tight is bringing the knees to the chest. We can see that swimmer right there. The knees are flat to the chest, and that's going to allow for a much smaller ball, and that's going to allow them to rotate a lot faster. One of the mistakes a lot of swimmers make is they try to keep their heels to their butt. where that doesn't necessarily allow them to tuck tight. But if they bring the knees to the chest, like this swimmer is doing here, if you watch the feet over the surface, they're necessarily going to be low to the water because the knees are so tight to the chest. So the more swimmers can keep things tight with the turn itself, bring the knees to the chest, the faster they're going to be able to rotate, and then the faster they're going to be able to get through the turn. It's a skill a lot of swimmers struggle with, and the simplest way to think about getting tight is, again, bringing the knees, punching the knees to the chest. That creates a tight ball that allows for faster rotation, and it allows swimmers to get through the turn fast. Finally, swimmers need to push off the wall with a great streamline and be really effective at maintaining their alignment coming off the wall. If they push off the wall with a giant arch in the back, if they push off the wall with sloppy streamline, if they push off the wall in the wrong direction, they're either going down or straight up, it's going to immediately put on the brakes and they're going to lose all the speed that they've created with a really strong push, pushing off a solid object, and they're going to give it all back, and they're going to give it all back fast. So what's really important is that everything is stacked up in a line from head to toe, everything's straight, everything's moving forward, and the more that swimmers can do that, the more that they're going to carry the speed that they generate going into the wall, coming off the wall. They're going to hold all that speed into the next lap, and that's going to set them up for a really effective lap, because if they have to re-accelerate coming off the wall, it's going to cost a lot more energy and it's going to be slower, and that's ultimately going to lead to slower surface swimming. So while turns can seem really complicated and they can be challenging to help swimmers learn, ultimately what swimmers have to do is really, really simple. They have to approach the wall with high speed, and they have to initiate the turn without pausing or without hesitating. Then they have to tuck tight to get through the turn fast. And the best way to do that is to drive the knees to the chest. That's going to get them into a really tight ball. It's going to get the heels to the butt, and they're going to be able to flip fast. And then finally, they need to be really good about pushing off the wall with great alignment and really great strength. And that's going to help generate a lot of speed and maintain a lot of speed going into the next lap. I'm sure you've coached really fast surface swimmers that absolutely get destroyed during their open turns. It costs them races, and they end up swimming a lot slower than they otherwise could. That's what we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to go over some key ideas about what creates really fast open turns and the big picture principles that swimmers need to execute on in order to get through the turns fast so they can get right back into swimming and ultimately go faster than they otherwise could. When it comes down to it, like the other skills, open turns are ultimately pretty simple. There are a couple things that swimmers need to do really well, and if swimmers can execute on these key simple skills, they're going to have fast open turns. The first thing we'll cover is that swimmers need to be really good about maintaining speed into the wall. The second thing is they need to be really good about getting the feet to the wall really quickly without rising up. And lastly, they need to get the feet in a position that allows them to push off in a really great line. That last piece might end up being a little bit controversial, but we can check out what some of the best swimmers are doing, and you can decide for yourself. So let's check it out. So if we watch the approach to the wall, what we're going to see here is that the swimmer is going to dive down and then kind of come back up. And the reason that that happens is it gives her a little bit of momentum to start rolling into it. So now her body is coming up into the wall, and then she can just roll her knees forward, and that's going to make it a lot easier to really switch directions. So if we watch here, what you can see is more than anything else, it's the rotation of the body as opposed to pulling the knees into the wall and having a kind of in and out motion. It's a lot more rotary. So you can see the whole body right here is rolling in and then rolling back. And so there's not a lift up out of the water. There's not any of that. It's really a rotation and a roll into the wall, driving the knees into the chest and then rolling backwards. And that whole process is going to be facilitated by what she does as she approaches the wall. So again, on this last stroke, diving down a little bit and then coming up into the wall, which starts that backwards rotation, and then she just drives the knees in, rolls the body back, and then she's back into the swim on the next lap. So again, in terms of the approach, in terms of the actual turn itself, what's happening, she's going to dive down, rise up, and then roll into it. And so more than anything else, that's the key concept, is the rotation and the roll of the body, which really drives the actual turn itself. So we see the same dynamics here. Swimmer rises up into the wall, drives the knees forward, and then there's just a roll back, just rolling back to get this change of direction. And so more than anything else, it's not a lift. And you can really just see here, especially with this split view, his head, his shoulders don't really come up at all. It's purely a rotational movement. And the more that the swimmers can rotate and roll through the turn itself, the faster the turn's going to be, the less effort it's going to be, the less range of motion they're going to move up and down, and the more that they can really eliminate resistance and get it done fast. And that's really what we're looking for, and that's really what's important. So if we watch this swimmer here, you can see coming up into the wall and then really rolling in, driving the knees in, rolling back, and then getting in a position where he can push off straight off the wall. And so that rolling action is going to be really important. It's really what we're looking for, and it's the most important aspect of executing the turn. So right there, there's that roll as opposed to lifting or anything else. It's the roll that's really important for the turn itself. Now, the other aspect of the turn I want to talk about is that the roll is not a purely backwards one. What we're going to see is that there's a rotation to the roll as well. And so a lot of swimmers are starting to get their feet up on the wall and then getting them pointed down in order to push off the wall. So if we watch here, she rolls up, but she's rotating too. And if we watch the feet, they're pointed down when she's getting ready to push off. And so rather than having the feet straight up, which is kind of what's been traditionally taught, more and more swimmers are getting those feet pointed down and then pushing from that position. The reason I think that happens, I'm not sure if it gives them a stronger push, but it gets them in a position where they're in a much better alignment. By the time she leaves the wall, she's already almost on her stomach. And I think that helps them get a much flatter push. They don't have to worry about rotating, and it makes it a whole lot easier to get into the pullout from a really aligned position. And so a key aspect of the turn itself and moving into the pullout is, can the swimmer maintain really great alignment and really maintain their speed prior to pulling out? And so I think that when they rotate and get the feet down, they're going to get a much more direct push. They're going to be able to stack everything up in line and get a much more aligned push. And it doesn't take more time. One of the thought processes is that by rotating, it takes more time, and you can save that time by pushing off the back and then rotating to the stomach. But if we watch here, all she does is just combine the backwards roll and the sidewards roll. And so she comes up, she comes in, and she's just rolling in and twisting at the same time. And there's no hesitation, there's nothing. She just gets onto her stomach. This swimmer here is going to do it to an even more extreme degree. So if we watch him roll up, he's rolling up, and then as he rolls, he's going to twist as well. And he's going to end up right here with the feet pointed down on the wall. And that's going to allow him to push off with a really great alignment, really streamlined, and his feet are almost straight down. And so that's going to be a lot more effective in helping get a really great push, and that's a key aspect of a really great pullout. So even if it takes slightly longer to add that little twist, which I don't think it does, it's probably worth it if swimmers are able to push off in a much better alignment. So the better that they can roll up and then roll over at the same time, the more they're going to get out of the push, the more they're going to get into their pullout, the further distance they're going to get, they're going to carry more speed, and that means less energy too, because if they don't have to get up and swim, that's going to be helpful too. So you can see the feet are pointed straight down, and then he's driving off like that. He's going to have a really great alignment rather than twisting through. We take a look here. This is a world record swim, and so he's driving and he's getting his feet pointed almost straight down and then pushing right into it. And so he's rolling in, he's tucking, and then he's twisting, and then he's driving straight forward. He's getting those feet pointed up. And this is the same swim, so you can see the feet are pointed down on the right leg, and it's pointed completely sideways on the left leg. They are most definitely not pointing straight up, and that's going to allow him to drive straight forward, have a really stacked position, minimize the amount of resistance that he creates. And again, it doesn't cost him anything. If he's rolling and then just rolling the hips to the side at the same time, it's still a really tight ball. There's just a sideways rotation to that ball as opposed to a purely backwards rotation. So the rotational element of the open turn is really, really important because it allows swimmers to, 1, rotate fast, 2, not come up out of the water, and 3, transition to a position where they can get off the wall with more alignment, whether they're doing a pull-out, whether they're doing underwater kicks. Being in a straighter line is going to allow them to get more out of those kicks rather than having an arch back when they try to rotate or twist. They're just going to be all stacked up, all ready to go, and they can just push off without taking more time on the wall. They don't have to waste time trying to manipulate their position as they rotate. They can just kind of get into it right away. So it's a simple strategy. Swimmers just have to figure out how to make it happen. So if swimmers can learn the backwards rotation aspect of the pull and the sideways rotation, they're going to be able to get through their turns a lot faster, a lot more directly, and it's going to take a whole lot less energy.